Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Bob.
How are you doing?
Good. You?
I cannot complain. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright. This is the Wright Show. You're Daniel Ingram, who is said to be enlightened, an enlightened Buddhist. In fact, that has been said by you. And I would say beyond that, I think I know people who are deep into this meditation thing more deeply than I am, and you are respected. I think there's no doubt that you are an adept meditator, have gone much further along the path than say I have, and then say almost everyone has. Leaving aside arguments about whether enlightenment is possible, who's enlightened, what the criteria are, and so on. Okay.
Well, actually, some of those arguments are important just from a practical point of view in terms of asking how does it help one's own practice. So if you're going to ask the question or make comparisons, or it's not that comparisons are always bad or always good. I'm a pragmatist, so I care about, like, is the comparison or the value judgment or the label helpful to you as a practitioner, as a person who wants to have a better life or reduce suffering or be more kind or compassionate or skillful or wise? That's actually the more interesting question rather than other aspects of the question, I think.
Now, that's interesting. Before I get to it, I want to follow that up. I want to say that you're author of Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, an unusually hardcore Dharma book. You're also the proprietor of DharmaOverground.org, where pretty serious meditators compare notes about how things are going, among other things. Now, your book is going to see a new incarnation. Is that right?
That's true. So I just a week or two ago sent the second edition's manuscript to my kind publisher, and so it's still a process after that, but hopefully it will be out sometime in the next 6 months or so. I have no idea, but it takes a little while. But yeah, as you know.
Well, good.
So,
good.
Yeah. Almost 5 years of hard work, so hopefully it'll be of value to somebody.
I recommend. So this is a new and improved version of the one that I would have seen in PDF form.
Yeah, it's much longer.
Okay, good.
It was long before. Now it's even longer now. It's got more details, more techniques, more maps, more emphasis on jhanas, more emphasis on magic and the powers, as well as an autobiographical section that I resisted in the first version, and people thought I should write, so I eventually got around to that.
Yeah.
That was, weirdly enough, the hardest part of the thing to write.
Yeah, I actually did that. I mean, as long as we're plugging books, I have a book coming out modestly titled Why Buddhism is True, The Science and Philosophy of Meditation and Enlightenment. People might logically ask, if I'm qualified to write that book, how come I'm asking you the questions? But we will skip that question for now. Anyway, that's coming out in a few weeks. But on this, so I want to say we're going to talk about a number of things today, including Donald Trump, actually. Try to talk about him in a Buddhist context, if that's not too sacrilegious. But
suffering.
It's all about suffering.
Buddhist.
It's all about suffering. He's a major source of dukkha for many people. Dukkha being the word often translated as suffering. So, on this point of the value of having a clear view of what enlightenment is, now, do you just mean that aspirationally it's clear to have an idea of what lies at the end of the path, even if you never get there, just to kind of direct yourself, to orient yourself?
So, Buddhism clearly has aspects of it that are specifically about awakening, right? I mean, Buddha was big into it, obviously.
Which is a kind of a synonym for enlightenment for our purposes, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, although some people distinguish between the two, I use the two interchangeably, but, whatever. Anyway, so I think that having a direction makes some kind of sense, because the direction itself is skillful. The direction of clarity, of, mindfulness of moment-to-moment experience, of reduction in suffering, of more kindness. I think all those are good things to have a basic sense of a directionality to. So, even so as an axis of development, I think it's a great thing to have as one of the things one works on, regardless of how far one gets, assuming you could measure distances or something along that axis clearly. But I think having faith that clarity leads to wisdom is a good idea. And I think that having some basic sense of what kind of techniques or things might be useful, having a direction of sensate clarity as a goal, I think is a good idea. Understanding what's going on in one's experience, emotions, thoughts, noticing those clearly, how they are, how they truly are. think is all a good idea, regardless of issues of exactly how far one gets or how one would measure that. So yeah.
Okay. And I was looking at your site, Dharma Overground, and there are these stages on the path to enlightenment. And one thing about your book is you kind of take them seriously.
Oh yeah.
And like there is a map. There is a map you can follow. Maybe different paths for different people, but there's such a thing as coherent, discernible progress. And I saw somebody said, one of the commenters said, he was very excited. He said, I attained stream entry, which is of course one of the threshold stages, and everybody congratulated him. And I was wondering, is it that clear? Is it like, are the criteria for stream entry so clear that he'd know what they were, and yeah, he did it, and that's that.
So for some people, it's very, very clear. The criteria are also straightforward. So once some people get stream entry, they're like, it's very obviously stream entry to them. It performs as expected. They can do the standard things. Their practice is now changed in specific ways. Their mind now performs differently. It has enhanced capabilities it didn't have before, and this is all straightforward to them. There are, however, some people who get stream entry for whom it's not so clear. For whatever reason, it's just the way they're built or wired, or the way they got to it, or the setting, or their expectations can cloud the picture a little bit. So sometimes sorting that out does take a little time. Sometimes continued practice, sometimes working with a good teacher, or bouncing it off good Dharma friends, co-adventurers who have experience in that kind of territory, whatever. And then there are other people who have experiences that they're really pretty sure are stream entry. They really are extremely impressive to them. They've got all kinds of cool aspects, but are actually not stream entry. So later on, with time and practice and further clarification,
and what are some of the criteria for stream entry?
Yeah, so the criteria for stream entry: one, to have completed a cycle of insight, which goes through the standard stages of insight. The highs, the lows, the equanimity, and then what's called conformity knowledge, where you clearly perceive pulses of reality as they are. All the way through, which leads to what would be called a fruition, where reality, sort of like the mind perfectly synchronizes with the full pulse of the entire sense sphere, disappears at the end of that, and then reappears. It's like a mental restart. So
consciousness itself is seen to kind of blink on and off?
No, the soul of the sensate universe disappears and reappears.
But that's not a reflection of what consciousness is doing?
So the relationship between consciousness and the sensate universe is a very, very long and complicated
let's don't get off on that.
How you want to?
Why don't you just move on to another criterion?
I was trying to keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Why don't you mention one other criterion, and then we'll move on.
One more criteria after that. You could go. There's a number of good ones. They now cycle through the stages of insight naturally, starting at something called the arising and passing away. They now have an increased appreciation of the Dharma beyond what people who don't have stream entry have. Could go on. It gets more technical past that point. Just depends on how far you want to go into that. You could read all about it in various places, including the book or old texts. There's plenty of good references. Stream entry. Very good idea. If you haven't gotten it yet, highly recommended. Not necessarily that difficult. It sounds absurd, but it's it's kind of like going to college. After high school, lots of people go to college after high school. So,
but generally, people have meditated a lot before they get there. I mean, this is not just kind of 30 minutes a day for a while, right?
There's a huge range. So I know of one person who got it in their first 7-day retreat at 18 years old. Basically, they're kind of the first time meditating. I know other people who have been struggling to get it for decades, and somehow it has eluded them. And then there's the middle ground, which is, some number of retreats of reasonable duration. And what's reasonable duration? We could all debate: 4 weeks, 6 weeks, I don't know, a few weeks, a few months. Those people who practice well and diligently with a high degree of focus on just the true nature of the six sense doors on a few-month retreat will have a reasonable shot at stream entry. What percentage? If you believe the Mahasi Sayadaw people in Asia, it's about 50% on a 3-month retreat. Following good Mahasi technique will get stream entry. In the West, it's less than that on the 3-month. at IMS, maybe 10% get stream entry. You know, tend to be more neurotic about our issues and obsessive and analytical, and we tend to not follow instructions well, want to sort of make up our own stuff. So we don't do as well as people in traditional cultures that follow traditional instructions by traditional teachers the way the teachers said them. So anyway, variable results, but still, it's not, you know, it's not like 0.5% or some, you know, 1 in 1,000. It's reasonable numbers.
And how is your life different after stream entry, just your everyday experience? Assuming you don't backslide, which I guess is possible, right?
Not possible.
Not possible?
So once that switch is thrown, it's thrown. So unless there's a stroke or something, you know, enough physiological damage to the brain can, you know, that gets hard to map. But assuming your brain's in good functioning shape, there's no backsliding. Now you are different. You throw the switch and the switch is thrown and that's it. So how is the life of a waking stream enterer different? There's a wide range in terms of what people report. Some people have a tremendous sense of relief, a tremendous sense of, wow, that was awesome, and that was what I was looking for. And there's this great sense of sort of a weight off, of a sense of clarity, of a sense of, some people notice increased purpose, some people notice reduced anxiety. The range of descriptions of what people describe after it is pretty large, actually. You'd think it would be so easy to sort out. Other people don't notice that much of a difference. Yes, something's different. They're like, okay, that was cool, stream entry, but it's not as big a deal to them. It didn't change as much. One of my teachers, a guy named Bill Hamilton, who unfortunately is now expired, had what he called the stuff model, where at each of the various stages of awakening, you might have sort of an amount of stuff, and that would be cleared out or dealt with or something at that level of awakening. It says his model anyway, but something of it seems to be true. And so people have sort of different amounts of stuff at each of the stages of awakening that may influence how rapidly or easily they get each of those stages, as well as the benefits at each of those layers of mind that they have then brung wisdom and clarity to. So some people at stream entry, not so big a deal to them. You know, and other paths or layers or levels of awakening might be a much bigger deal to them. For some people, the stream entry, it's like, wow, this was absolutely amazing. What I was looking for, it's extremely satisfying, and makes major changes in their psyche and their life. I could go into some of the technical things about the meditative things that it should do to people, including cycling and you know, repeated fruitions and some other stuff. But there's a range out there.
When you actually people say, wait a second, if the effects are this diverse, why should we think of it as truly a thing, right? A really unified concept.
Okay, so for example, going through puberty has a range of different effects on different people, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a life stage that basically almost everybody goes through, except for a few people, some unusual hormonal whatever. But right. The effects of puberty are radically different on different people, right? So there's some similar things.
But there are some things you can say are true of 99.9% of people who go through puberty, like pubic hair, right. A deepened voice in males, and so on. So what would you say? What is the equivalent of that in stream entry?
So the equivalent things is someone should be able to sit down in a stage called the arising and passing away. They should be able to cycle up through the stages of insight in a predictable fashion in a way that people below stream entry can't do. A lot of people can learn to go through these in 10 to 20 minutes, whereas before it might have taken months on retreat. So it's very different. Most people, though not all people, can learn to get repeat fruitions, where they can learn to rise up to the place where, again, the mind flashes onto basically perfect, pristine clarity of the whole field. The whole thing vanishes, reappears, and it's this very nice mental reset with a really nice bliss wave to it that comes after it. There's some other more technical things that some meditators who have that kind of skill and inclination can learn to do, such as learn to even call up the stages of insight in order and out of order, just by number or just by inclining the mind to them, and even to stay in them as long as they wish. So what we call review practice. There are other transformations that can occur. So if you want to get sort of traditional, 10 fetters model about it, which would be one of the models of awakening, they, in theory, have reduced skeptical doubt about the teachings of the Buddha because they've directly experienced, say, the 3 characteristics of the sense field for themselves. They've directly noticed that the stages of insight are true because they can experience them clearly in their own practice. They know other things about the Dharma that are very true and clear in their own experience in a way that people below stream entry may not notice in the same kind of a way to that degree. May have reduced something called personality belief, the notion that there really is a continuous self somewhere, because they've seen their whole experience disappear and then reappear and reconstitute itself and watch the reconstitution of the sense of, oh, I am, the sense of observer, the sense of agent, reconstitute itself out of just pristine sort of this restart and go, okay, wait, that's not nearly the solid, stable thing I thought it was before. In fact, that seems to be some kind of construct, not that that construct might not still cause a lot of confusion and it can still be kind of sticky at these early stages of awakening. So these later stages do a better job of really deconstructing that as somebody walks around.
Were you this? Were you this vibrant and this animated a speaker before Buddhism took you where it took you?
Yes, I think so. I think it's just kind of the
just curious. Just curious. I was wondering if I would start talking faster if I attained enlightenment, but apparently not. Apparently that's not a variable.
No.
So, not that you're talking too fast. It's great. We need more dynamic people in the world, not fewer. And I'm sorry, I'm not one of them. So, before we move on to Trump, let's talk a little more about arising and passing. Just because I think when we had our first conversation, and we've now had several, you said you gathered that I had experienced the arising and passing. And I wasn't sure what the basis for saying that was, and I in retrospect, doubted it. I mean, I've been on a number of meditation retreats. I've had extraordinary experiences on meditation retreats. I've had experiences that I think give me a sense of what the full-on experience of not-self would be like, say, that have given me a sense of the kind of intuitive apprehension of so-called emptiness and so on, but I don't really think I've done arising and passing. So can you tell us what...
So almost certainly you have. The chances of you being this fascinated, this dedicated, this inspired, this engaged with the teachings of the Dharma and be below arising and passing away are almost nothing. So that in of itself is almost
describe
fairly
it, I'll
diagnostic. Tell you. But when you describe these profound experiences on retreat, pick out some of the most profound and give a description of them, and we'll see what we think of them. How about that?
Well, I mean, on my first retreat, I had an experience that bordered on hallucinogenic that had to do with viewing the interior of my mind. I don't think I need, I especially want to get into that because I don't think it was as relevant in a way.
Probably was, actually. So that sort of dismissal may not be so helpful. And actually, if you're going to ask phenomenological questions, map questions, then you got to be willing to go into the phenomenology because otherwise it's just sort of abstract talk.
I actually described this at the end of my book. I'm a little self-conscious about having done so. So the full description's there. But what I can say is...
Why?
Well, it's personal. It has to do with issues and what kind of person I am and so on. Right, I know.
Yeah, but the phenomenology of some of the raptures, some of the frequencies, some of the vibrations or lights or images or visions, rather than sort of the content of the psychology, because a lot of these things will have dual aspects. They'll have this sort of psychological, personal, story aspect. But they'll also have the sort of core Dharma aspects that have to do with really strong attention or really clear comprehension of phenomena or really enhanced concentration or visuals or raptures or vibrations or movements or tensions or something that gets into the realm of Dharma raptures and Dharma criteria for mapping people. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so what I will say about this experience is there's a thought that I have recurringly had that is not a very compassionate thought toward myself. It's a self-chastisement, and
common enough.
Yeah, I know. It's just like you screwed up again kind of thing. But it was as if, I mean, first of all, I kind of entered like a threshold, like I was entering a new space. And at first I was like, whoa. I mean, this is my first retreat, right? And at first I'm like, and it's like red and purple. I'm like, whoa, this is a new place. And then what I observed was actually, in a sense, that thought, except that for the first time, what it looked like was one entity saying it to another. And I realized it was kind of like the inside of my mind. So normally I would just think of myself as both the source and recipient of the communication, like simultaneously. Mm-hmm. But now I was breaking it up. And it was like, no, it was coming from one thing, and it was directed toward another thing. Now, well, what's funny is the meditation teacher at the end of the retreat, I said just that. I said, like, normally I think of myself as the source of that. This time I thought of something other than me as the source of the thought and me as the recipient. And he said, "You're half right." And you know what he meant, right?
There's no you to be you either.
There's no you to be the recipient.
Right.
Right. So is that I don't actually consider that the most interesting version of the most interesting proximity to not self that I've had in a certain sense. But there is that.
Well, at the minimum, that's a stage called mind and body, which is where thoughts split off. So most people, that's the first really important insight stage, and actually gives some clues to things that happen way, way, way down the path. So it gives hints of them, right? So it's important. It's extremely important insight. And the MBSR kids, right, who really like, being able to use this sort of low-level insight to gain...
That's mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Right. I mean, so like, this is really important for that kind of early psychological work and meditation work where you notice that, wait, the thoughts aren't me. The thoughts are just these thoughts. They're just these things. They arise, they vanish. They weren't me. They were kind of over there. I can look at them sort of as objective phenomena.
Right.
There's still a sense of me looking at the thought, but the fact of the thought splitting off itself is still profound and an important piece of the puzzle, right? So that's at least a stage called mind and body. But again, your interest in these things is way more characteristic of some above the horizon.
I'm just interested. I mean, partly I'm interested because I'm interested intellectually. Because, I mean, like, the argument I'm making in the book is that Buddhism long ago made this claim that we are really deluded or confused about the nature of the world in here, ourselves, and the nature of the world out there. And I'm arguing that, like, evolutionary psychology, you can make the same case in terms of evolutionary psychology. In other words, now there's a plausible account of why the brain evolved by natural selection to lead to these kinds of delusions. That's
sure.
So part of my interest is, I'm enthusiastic intellectually, but no, I'm not gonna. You're right. I mean, my first retreat was so dramatic, and I felt so much better at the end, and it did transform my view of the world. Now that kind of fades if you're not super diligent in your practice, which I wasn't at first.
It fades regardless. So all of the highs fade.
Yeah.
Right. So all of the highs fade. All of the wows fade. All of the wow, that was amazing. All the things that blows your doors off fade. Yeah. They all end. So that's also Buddhism 101. Every single peak experience fades.
Yeah. So but you get recurringly excited about and see, this is, it's like
you cycle back through these things. So you go up and down, right? So you go up the highs, the lows, the high insights, the dark spaces. There's this cycle, right?
There is that, but there's also the fact, I mean, in terms of the value of a retreat, like if you have that and other experiences that convince you that our ordinary way of seeing things is pretty deeply confused, right? You have apprehensions that are quite different from your ordinary way of experiencing things, like, and this is another related to not self, is like you're meditating on a retreat and you feel that the tingling in your foot is no more a part of you than a bird that's singing, right?
Right.
Now
that tingling is actually important because that's impermanence and that's vibrations, which is anything
that's fine. Actually, this may have just been a tingling in my foot. I don't mean this may not have been a special tingling.
Well, actually, any tingling is worth noting because that kind of fine precision of mind that can identify tingling is actually the kind of resolution that insight rises from. But
what I want to say is, like, having those experiences on retreats adds a dimension to the less dramatic experiences you have in daily practice, is what I mean. In other words, if you're led by more dramatic experiences to believe that a truly clear view of reality would be really quite different from the view you carry around, then modest movements in that direction during your daily practice seem a little more special, or you interpret them in the context of the retreat. So in other words, it's not just stress reduction. It is, when you're viewing your anxiety from a distance or whatever, that is a little bit of not, so that's recognizing that that's not self.
Yes.
And so anyway, that's, I was having this discussion today with somebody, and he was very skeptical about the value of taking not self seriously, and I was just saying, well, if nothing else, the existence of it as a kind of ideal can inform your daily practice, even though you're not going to have the full on experience every day.
Sure.
Okay. So, should we? Do you mind talking about Trump?
Happy to talk about Trump.
Anything else you want to say? I mean, we could say a little more about this and then start talking about Trump, which would probably be an excuse for dividing the conversation in half and making it 2 episodes. It's up to you.
Or maybe we can pull Trump back to some more ultimate Dharma stuff, or whatever you want to do. It's all
well. Let's talk Trump. So, okay. The first question is there like a Buddhist case against Trump? In other words, I should say I happen to know that you're not a big fan of Trump. People know I'm not a big fan of Trump.
That is true.
But would you say that he is like an affront to Buddhist values or something? In other words, would you say that, look, if you really get Buddhism, you should not be a Trump fan? Would you go that far?
Even beyond Buddhism. So let's just talk basic ethics. So if you believe that truth is valuable, I think that's an ethic that most cultures and societies, or perhaps all of them generally, would value beyond just questions of Buddhist ethics. And if you believe that Trump may have some relatively loose or convenient or other relationship to the truth that may be somewhat less savory than some might think is optimal, then that might be an affront to ethics just in general terms, if that makes sense.
Of course, many politicians might be, but he would be a particularly vivid...
He seems to be sort of trying to define one end of the spectrum.
Right. And succeeding.
Yes. There's not a... I mean, even as cynical as one can get about politicians, there are not many examples that are quite that extreme. Yeah, I would say.
Okay, so there's that.
Right. So basic ethics, and also in terms of fascination with oneself. So obviously, it's tricky to psychologically or psychiatrically or whatever diagnose people that you don't know, have never met, etc. But these sort of groundswell of psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors and social workers and other people who are starting to be willing to say maybe he has some narcissistic tendencies, or perhaps he has full-blown malignant narcissistic personality disorder, one of the cluster B personality disorders that tend to cause a lot of trouble in the world. There are plenty of people who are willing to put their neck out there in a professional setting and say, yes, we think this guy has a major personality disorder, which is known for causing an obsession with oneself.
He is kind of the opposite of the not self.
Sure.
Which in Buddhism is taken as an ethical. Well, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's often characterized as being taken as not only a metaphysical truth, but an ethical ideal.
Right. So a fascination with oneself, or filtering the world through, everything relates to me and my needs and my moods, and even truth and, relationship of how an entire nation's politics or foreign policy or business decisions or legislation should be filtered through one's, or perhaps one's family's, personal needs. Clearly, that's the sort of thing that this country in general, as an ethic, has decided was a bad idea, going back to the founding fathers seem to think that kind of thing was a bad idea, and lots of other ethicists throughout governments, not unique to America, have thought that sort of fascination and focus driving policy was a bad idea. And also within Buddhism, clearly, endless fascinations with oneself and a sort of a wrathful, or in the unskillful sense, or vengeful relationship to other people, a lot of grudge holding, a lot of petty lawsuits, a lot of intimidation, a lot of insults, a lot of derogatory comments, a lot of things that seem to disparage other nations and cultures, as well as genders, as well as religious groups, as well as ethnicities. The list of offenses goes on and on and on, as well as perhaps subversion of democracy, etc. These are large numbers of things that most, I hope, plenty of reasonable, ethical thinking people are uncomfortable with, at the very least, if not outraged by.
Mm-hmm.
And
just to use him as an example of one thing that's interesting about Buddhism is it's not just that his way of being seems to run against Buddhist ethical ideals. The claim in Buddhism is that if he followed the practice and wound up just seeing things more clearly, he would not behave like that, right?
So questions of behavior are sometimes tricky, and exactly how awakening modifies people with major personality disorders is actually sort of it's a hot topic at the moment in some of my social circles, and occasionally even in my life, because the personality disorders seem to be tough nuts to crack.
I see.
So the question is, and it's a question I'm not sure that traditional Buddhism has addressed particularly well, because they didn't even really have the conception of the personality disorders as sort of the defined entities that we think of them as, antisocial or borderline or narcissistic or histrionic, particularly the cluster B personality disorders that tend to cause a lot of the trouble in relationships and in the world. The question of whether or not simply awakening is enough to totally mitigate or alleviate those, I actually have a reasonable amount of evidence that it is not. So that there are awakened sociopaths, and there's plenty of evidence for this. This is not going to be popular with some Buddhist traditionalists, what I'm saying right now, but there's plenty of evidence that people who have actually awakened in that sort of, if you think of awakening itself as just one axis of many axes of development, that doesn't necessarily provide perfect psychological perfection or perfect elimination of all neuroses or perfect, kindness or perfect behavior or perfect conduct or perfect speech. If you take it just as, one can see that clearly along this axis, the true nature of sensate phenomena, does that necessarily totally transform all other aspects of personality just by seeing that? There's plenty of real world evidence that it does not. And I hate to sort of say that, but then on the other hand, as a shout out to the other Buddhist traditionalists who are listening to this, the other trainings of morality and concentration, so of ethical behavior and speech and action and thought, is extremely valuable. And so there have been endless debates over the millennia, really, within Buddhism, and particularly between Zen, the Tibetans, and the Theravadins, and all this stuff about how awakening transforms behavior. How does it transform emotions? How does it transform thought? How does it transform speech? And there's a wide range of opinions among some very, very strong traditional practitioners, and some of the great practitioners that we've all heard of, across the millennia, the famous ones. Even they did not come to the same conclusions about this from their own experience and their own writings and what we have access to from them. And so I unfortunately submit as a thesis that it may be that even if Trump were fully awakened, that he would not necessarily not be a narcissist. He might be a kinder one, a wiser one, a more insightful one, a narcissist who had more insights into what was going on with him. And there are people with the personality disorders that do have a lot of insight. So, like, for example, in the emergency department, a substantial portion of the people who come to us...
We should say you are a doctor who works in an emergency
department. So I work in emergency departments. There are a reasonable number of people who come to us in emergency departments who also have aspects of, traits or, full-blown aspects of the cluster B personality disorders, which can be very challenging for them, can cause a lot of disruption in their lives and the lives of those around them, and very stressful and a cause of a lot of suffering. But some of them have a lot of insight into this. So, like, I've had, patients come in and say, oh, by the way, I have antisocial personality disorder, or I have borderline personality disorder. And if I seem to be pushing your triggers or causing trouble, I'm sorry about that. It's hard for me to resist it, but I'm working on that. And so they've got this high degree of insight around it. They've got a lot of wisdom around it. They've got this other meta perspective where they can, like, something else in their brain is not caught up in that and is able to monitor that and say, okay, wait, these instincts, these tendencies may not be so skillful, and they've got the sort of metacognition that can look at that and moderate it and bring wisdom and clarity to it. So, and it's always really nice when they're able to do that, because they suffer less and we do also. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I'd certainly say it's kind of my experience that, from observing people, that meditative progress tends, in the sense of statistical correlation, to make people, in some sense, better people. They're less likely to fly off the handle and so on. So there's like a statistical correlation, but it's not guaranteed to do so. Now, having said that, I think a lot of people would say, but wait a second, if you truly attained awakening, including the complete apprehension and realization of not self, how could you be a narcissist? Isn't a narcissist? I mean, isn't there some tension between not self in the full sense of the word and narcissism?
There obviously that question gets to the heart of these issues. There are real-world data points that point to the fact that somehow aspects of those two things can simultaneously exist. Now, when you say complete and final and total, okay, so what's complete and final total awakening is, those words get thrown around a lot, and there's a range of opinions on what those endpoints are. Does that make sense? But regardless of whatever the endpoint is, there are clearly people who have awakened in some traditional sense, in that they have the meditative chops, they have the ability to describe the phenomenology, they can point with extreme clarity to the true nature of phenomena. They have a lot of the skill sets, the perspectives, the transformations of consciousness that one might reasonably call some degree of awakening, and yet might still also have some very, very unskillful personality traits, some very unskillful residual things. And this is no surprise. I mean, you only have to notice the guru scandal sheets, right? I mean, like, sure, these people who simultaneously seem to be able to point to real wisdom. They really can. Like, yes, I mean, they're clearly seeing something. They've clearly got something. And yet something in their behavior, something in their ethics, something in the way they sometimes treat some of their students, or money or drugs or power or whatever it is sure, like, you're that's perhaps not optimal from some point of view. Do you see what I mean? And there's this contradiction sure, that's been noticed thousands of times. And then you've got all these various schools of thought on, like, what to do with that. Is it that they're not really nearly as enlightened as we all think they are?
That would be my temptation, is to say
halfway. That's what I call the halfway up the mountain school, based on the book of, basically the same name.
Right.
So that's the halfway up the mountain school. Or there's the maybe this is just one axis of development school, and to really transform some of the personality disorders or some of the unskillful personality traits or some of the psychology, maybe an entirely different axis of development. That yes, you may have noticed the true nature of sensate phenomena, but does that transform all habit, all residual karma, all of those things? Yeah, maybe not so much. And so I'm going to leave some openness to that, because there's reasonable, there are plenty of very smart, very thoughtful, very accomplished people who have different opinions on that. But as a question, I think it's still a question worth asking, and not assuming that purely insight practice or purely perceiving the truth from a practice point of view, because I care about practice, more of like the theory. I care about where the rubber meets the road in practice. I think that those questions, their mere existence, and the fact that there are valid arguments and valid real-world examples of people who may have a lot of awakening based on the way they point to it and some aspects of their consciousness that also may not have truly done some of the other work, that all three Buddhist trainings, morality, concentration, wisdom, are still of great value. And there's some people who will lean very highly on the insight stuff and say, oh, just because I have the insight stuff, I've got this unbelievably amazing thing, when they may have some other real shadow sides to their lives that are not well illuminated, that they're not doing a good job with, that cause suffering for themselves and those around them. And so I think it calls to all of us to be reasonably skeptical and say, okay, no, I still need to really make sure I work on training and morality well. I still need to work on depths of concentration that help pacify some of the other unskillful energies and aspects of emotion well, and keep those as still a very important focus, even as we pursue the path of insight. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I subscribe to, and I gather that's, in a way, an articulation of what you call the halfway up the mountain view, or at least, it's it's a little different than that.
What you mean the mountain is. It means, so the way I view this, there are lots of things we can develop. And just because one has developed an outrageously clear reduction or perhaps even elimination of the sense of agency, of the sense of center point, of the sense of some thinker, of the sense of some doer, one may have developed a very profound sense of the luminosity or intrinsic immediacy or vibrancy or, timelessness or ephemerality of the whole sense field all the way through, in a way that truly does seem to pervade all the way through all the sense doors and all the aspects of consciousness, and yet still maybe have aspects that are unskillful in some way. And that is borne out again and again if you actually get to know personally and hang out with for long enough people who have very deep practices.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, this would just suggest that we should be very sparing on our use of the terms enlightenment and awakening. But let me just quickly put it one other way. I mean, just to go back to the Buddha's first post-enlightenment sermon, the idea that, tanha or thirst or however you want to, desire, however you want to translate tanha, is at the root of suffering, and the cure involves the relinquishing of tanha. Well, if you imagine Donald Trump relinquishing tanha, I think that would that would take care of the problem, right? I mean, almost
it is easily theorized to likely be a grand improvement.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. So back to Trump. Now, here's a question: here's what I think about what I've been thinking a lot about what a mindful view of Trump is, and I have ideas about like using mindfulness to maybe resist Trumpism more skillfully than some are resisting it, you might say, and I can talk about that later, but if we have time. But for now, I want to say to kind of put an accent on that question. Let's take it further and say not just if you're in a truly mindful state, how do you view Trump? But let's go further and say if you're somewhere in the vicinity of enlightenment, and you're much better to answer this question than I am. How does Trump look? Now, my guess would be that you don't have hatred of Trump per se, the human being, which I think a lot of opponents of Trump have. But I would guess for starters, that would not be a thing.
So actually, when I look at the whole Trump phenomena, I see, and I live in what might be called a red state. So 70%
might be.
Of voters
It's
or whatever.
Alabama, right?
It's Alabama. It's
you might call that
state
red.
As they go. Yeah, I might call it a red state. So 70% of voters or something, whatever, thought that Trump was a better choice and voted that way. I work with lots of doctors who are extremely compassionate, kind healers who truly dedicate their lives to helping other people and have spent years training to do that and put in very long hours trying to reduce suffering in the world, who yet think that Donald Trump is a good idea. And some of them even still do, now that they've gotten however many months of real world example of how that's all playing out. And we have conversations about this where we all try to be mindful and respectful of each other's views. But the Trump phenomena to me is related to a staggering amount of suffering, fear. You
mean support for him involves a lot of
support for him, a lot of hope that sort of perspective will lead to better outcomes for people. So there's this sort of it's surprising to me, coming from an extraordinarily leftist. I'm pretty way far to the left. I don't know if that's obvious yet, but it perhaps will be. But I'm way far on the leftist side of politics. But when I talk to my colleagues and friends and patients and people around town and stuff who are on the far right, there's a tremendous amount of fear of a lot of change that's gone on. There's a lot of frustration with economic progress. There's been a lot of people who have been left out of whatever economic recovery took place after 2008. There's a lot of wanting to preserve things that they think are valuable or go back to things that they thought were valuable. So there is this weird kind of compassion underlying that. It's a strange thing to say, but a lot of these people I work with, they're very good people, and they truly believe that somehow we've got to reemploy poor people, and they think that Trump was the person to do that, and they think that we have to bolster the middle class, and they think that Trump was the person to do that, and we think we have to preserve our resources here and focus more on ourselves and get our act together here. And so, and they're making some valid points. So the wage gap, between the rich and the poor has widened to extraordinarily high degrees. It's not just a few percentage points. It's staggering change between, the ultra wealthy and the poor in terms of how much their spending power has gone down over the last 30-something years and how much the spending power of the ultra-rich has gone up. That they put the ultra-rich then in charge of making that better is a little ironic, and perhaps I wouldn't think it's the best idea, but a lot of this is coming out of a real sense of suffering, right? So there's this tremendous amount of suffering, economic suffering, fear, a lack of opportunity, lack of education, and even some of my educated colleagues still, there's a tremendous amount of fear and suffering that led to these decisions and these sorts of votes and this sort of politics, and to an embracing of styles that I consider basically abject fascism. Right, so we're getting. I'm letting the politics out a little bit more. So right, but fascism tends to ride in on the twin wings of one, a very greedy sort of opportunistic business culture, right, a sort of unbridled greed from the capital markets, and a wanting to basically gut regulations and have the government basically not just streamline industry, but really sort of have no barriers between it and industry, right? So the merger of the industrial power of oligarchs or plutocrats or whatever, and the state. And then so that's the one wing that fascism rides in on, which is greed, right? That's a reasonable Buddhist thing to talk about. Just unbridled desire for massive amounts of power and wealth, which is part of the American shadow side, right? I mean, that's the shadow side of the American dream, right? Is to make crazy amounts of money for yourself and your family or whatever. And then the other wing that fascism sort of flies in on is an extremely disenfranchised proletariat, or lower class and even middle class people who are very afraid, very scared, very confused, seeing their wealth and their power slipping away from them, which it has been, and that's true. And then embracing relatively radical and seemingly simplistic, perhaps overly simplistic strategies. By some sort of big powerful daddy figure will save them from their suffering and their pain and their fear, and will just take over and make everything right again, and or great again, or whatever it is. So that's if you look at Mussolini or Suharto or Hitler, or Pinochet, or all these Franco. Franco's sort of a special case in his own weird way, but sort of the classic fascists, or some of the Eastern European fascists of the 1930s to 40s. Sorry, I'm going on and on. But they rode in on the sort of the twin wings of this, and there's a tremendous amount of greed on the capital side, and there's a tremendous amount of fear and suffering on the the ordinary people side that lead to these kinds of extreme decisions. And I think if you can't address those two things, or understand those two things, then the whole Trump phenomena doesn't make any sense to you. And I think the Democrats, I'm really profoundly disappointed in the Democrats to not articulate a more clear leftist position in the face of that, right? Because there are ways through union power, through real wage increases, through real protection of workers, through raising international working standards and wages globally, that actually would have a tremendously good impact.
This is a hobby horse of mine, by the way, is actually to use trade agreements to raise standards abroad. There is such thing as a left-wing trade agreement, but there's been. In principle, there hasn't been much in that way, but you can put labor and environmental accords into a labor into a trade agreement, and there's been no discussion of that. I mean, leave aside true, far left. There's been almost nothing affirmative from the Democrats. It's like on healthcare, just give us a modest proposal for improving Obamacare, and people will see that makes more sense than what the Republicans are proposing. Right. Instead of spending all your time trying to amp up fear of Trump. And and this is part of what I mean by a mindful approach, because if you're mindful, and let's say you're actually practicing mindfulness, then your surely emotional reaction to Trump would be more subdued, right? You would not you wouldn't freak out about him, right? You'd be able to. You're gonna differ with me here?
I might. It depends on the emotional model you're using of awakening and of spiritual practice in general.
I'm not even talking about awakening. I'm just talking about
of spiritual practice. I mean, because it's a direction, it's an axis of development, right? And so there's a wide range of schools of thought on what's the right relationship to, say, anger, right? Or is there skillful anger? Is there, sort of Vajra anger or wrathful anger, as the Tibetans might say, or is just all anger bad, as the Theravadins might say, or some mystical mumbo jumbo-y thing like the Zen people would say that you can't make sense of, and then puts you in this paradoxical situation of here's your anger and you have to come up with some wise response to it, right? I mean, so depends on how you want to play that thing. But is there reasonable? Are there reasonable uses for the skillful aspects of outrage? Yeah, there probably are. And so, like, would you necessarily not feel outrage if you were a good spiritual practitioner? No, you might still feel outrage, right? Is it unreasonable to feel outrage at suffering? It kind of depends on the quality of the outrage and what you do with it, I would say.
Yeah,
like, is all outrage bad? Is maybe not, So,
right. I mean, the motivational power of outrage is not something you want to leave aside.
You go.
Right.
That's good.
You want to either preserve that via outrage per se or just have the functional equivalent, right? Sure. But what I would say is, if anger is literally distorting your vision, like if you're saying he's evil, so it must be the case that all the people who support him are racists and horrible, then you're just...
okay, yeah, that's definitely problematic. Right?
Well, that's what I think.
You're not going to understand it, and you're not going to reach them because they need to be part of the solution.
Exactly,
right? So,
and I think some of that is happening. I'm talking about the way emotions just literally warp your vision and impede clear analysis of the problem. And I think a lot of that's going on.
And clear compassion and clear understanding of the suffering in other people that led to these decisions. Because if you can't understand that, if you can't address that directly and say, okay, there is a problem that this is the symptom of, right? You could say Trump's the problem, or you could say Trump's the symptom. I think he's more the symptom. He's showing us something about our country, about our direction, about our understanding of ourselves, about our shadow sides of our culture, about the shadow sides of America. And all of those need to be clear and compassionately addressed. And the people who are caught up in this, all of us caught up on both sides of it, need to figure out how to see each other's humanity and have more skillful conversations and figure out to work to, I would say, some more skillful solutions.
And that's what I'm talking about, because I think a lot of his political strength derives from the perception on the part of his supporters that we all have contempt for them and for him, and we hate them, and it's unfair, and the media hates them and has contempt and so on. And I think an unskillful reaction to him, and here I think mindfulness meditation can actually be an asset and make your reaction more skillful. An unskillful reaction to him tends to do his work and sustain this idea that we all hold him in contempt.
That's true.
Okay, that's kind of what I mean by like a more mindful resistance. And I mean, almost to the point of even not thinking of it as resistance to Trump per se, but just what he represents. I mean, not getting too wrapped up in this particular person.
Well, I actually go back to the economics. I actually think you somehow have to address the economics and reframe it in core ethical terms, where we have to figure out better ways to help people. And I don't think the ultra-rich are likely the best people to help those who are not the ultra-rich. That's my thesis. It's been said before. Anyway, it's not a new idea. But we have to figure out how to raise wages. We have to figure out how to get more social equity. We have to provide more social opportunity. We have to, and economic opportunity. And in the face of industrialization and the mechanization of industry, those are probably going to require a radical restructuring of things like money, of things like capital ownership, of the tax code, of making sure everybody has some reasonable amount of gain from the industrialization and mechanization of work. And if we can't figure out how to solve those problems, I think we're in trouble. And I'm worried that greed and territoriality is going to scuttle a lot of that important work to help people have, freedom and economic opportunity and enough food to eat and good education and time and all those things that mechanization and industrialization were supposed to provide. And instead, yes, they've provided some aspects of it for some people, but there are a lot of people who have been profoundly left behind by all of that. And these ideas are not new. So like back in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, there were people who were talking about how you've got to figure out how to redistribute some of that wealth that's generated from this, or you're going to have profound social unrest. I mean, these ideas go back to the early communists and Marx and Engel, so all those things. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, you're probably, if we fleshed all this out, we would probably discover that you're farther left than I am. But I agree with the basic point. And I mean, it's a time of just tremendous change because of globalization and because of technological change. And it's a real challenge to just respond wisely, even if you didn't face political constraints. I mean, the policies themselves, even if you could just dream them up and implement them, that would be pretty challenging. But when you got to deal with the politics at the same time, it gets messy.
That's true.
And
then when you have a media that's basically polarizing America into two groups that are living in utterly different reality tunnels. Right, with totally different messages, totally different selective reporting, totally different vision of what's important and ethics and even ways to think. So even more important, I think, than some of the news that's put out there is some of the reality channels people are being taught to think of themselves and the world and even process logic and emotion through totally different channels that are really causing a striking divergence I don't think we've seen before in this country. Like during Vietnam, the major news media were not so polarized and different, for example. And even still, we had a lot of polarization in the country. Now, it's the diversity of news channels leads to a range of people getting basically programmed to radically different views on even not only what the facts are, but how to view and relate to those facts. That is a new phenomena that I don't think we're handling well.
Yeah, I just saw a chart today charting it was in some news site, charting the relative fortunes of CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. And what you saw was CNN wasn't doing much of anything. MSNBC has grown tremendously in viewership. Fox has grown a little. So you see the right and people moving away for what in that context is probably, you could say, the centrist channel, CNN, toward MSN. Although, well, you're right. I mean, MSNBC's left of centrism is overstated, but
that's true. It's
because, I mean, given Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough is nobody's leftist, but still, it's they are the primetime, Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes. That's more explicitly anti-Trump than CNN's primetime program. But anyway, we don't need to get into that. But I mean, the general point is true. As other people have noted, we are more and more in like media cocoons that reflect and amplify our own worldviews. So it's a challenge. Well, maybe,
as the Buddha said, people with views just go around annoying one another, and we're taking that to new extremes.
Well, exactly. So. And I guess what I'm hoping for is that opponents of Trumpism or whatever would work to do less of that, and it's hard. But I think overreaction to him is basically his friend. It's basically his ally. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of overreaction to news, to I won't get into detail, but to every I won't get into it, but you'll just see these things that he's ridiculed for, and then you'll go actually look at the video, and look, he does plenty of things that legitimately invite ridicule, but things where you'll look at the actual video and you go, no, that's just not that bad.
But to me, it takes up so much bandwidth when, from my point of view, the discussions should be about underlying economic principles. Mm-hmm. Underlying ethical principles, underlying discussions about who we should be as a nation, what our relationship to being the international police force or, of the world should be, what our relationship to the multinational corporation should be, what's a reasonable relationship to, the IMF and capital markets, and what's, reasonable things to be doing with our currency, those kinds of sophisticated discussions, as well as what's a reasonable thing to be doing with labor power. Mm-hmm. How do we figure out how to really actually create jobs in a way that actually works in some kind of way and doesn't do horrible things to international trade? What are the reasonable basis of, should you have tariffs or globalization? those sort of more sophisticated discussions, which are complicated, advanced discussions, to me, mostly get lost in the sensationalism, the tawdry day-to-day of some tweet or some, new aspect of some, scandal or something. But there's very, very little sophisticated time dedicated to those much harder questions, which require a degree of knowledge that unfortunately a lot of people don't seem to even have a reasonable basis for having those discussions, understandings of micro and macroeconomics, and so this is all getting very dull all of a sudden. But that's the problem. It gets dull when it should be passionately fascinating topics. How do you have a central banking system that that doesn't lead to boom and bust cycles? How do you is inflation a good thing or a bad thing? Well, for some people, it transfers, wealth back down to debtors. Maybe inflation sometimes is a good thing. I mean, these kinds of nuanced discussions are not really happening in the news media.
No, not even the elite media much. Not even the opinion pages of elite newspapers.
Right.
But partly because Trump is so successfully dominating the news cycle.
That's true.
Even with the outrageous stuff that people like people on the left greet as like an opportunity, like, okay, he did something stupid again, but no, it's all distracting us from a skillful resistance.
Right, or a more skillful awakening to in the sort of more relative sense to the potentials that we have with our current levels of technology and resource and global communication to do something much better. And even when I look at some of my favorite news organizations I like The Nation and Vanity Fair and The Economist and BBC, even most of those are not going to the depth that I would actually really prefer, and still too fascinated with some of the momentary sensationalism.
Right, and I mean, as
again,
the Democrats,
how do you get most people reading even that level of media? I have no idea, and most people are not, and they're not going to. And then and that being the case, then how do you have the conversation at a way that gets broad enough to be inclusive? Of people with a broad range of perspectives? I do not have a good answer to that question.
It's a challenge. But let's not give up. So we've been doing this an hour, so that's probably a sign that we should not do it anymore for the time being. But I'd like to have another conversation about this down the road, especially after thinking more about it. I mean, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to cultivate like a wiser approach to all this, but we certainly have our work cut out for us. Again, if the Democrats aren't even proposing like a healthcare alternative, how long would it take?
Bernie, right?
What? There is Bernie, right? But I mean, like the congressional, the Nancy Pelosi's and Chuck Schumer's of the world. Unless I'm missing something.
No, the Democrats are having a hard time getting together behind what I would call a real liberal message, which is ironic. Mostly the Democrats look sort of, from European politics point of view, they look like a center to slightly center-right party, right? I mean, they don't look left like a real left party. So from my point of view, as a pretty far to the left leftist, just disclosing my politics, I don't see a party that really represents me. I see a few people that are, Bernie's getting close. Yeah. He's getting there. Is he far left enough for me? No, he's not. But I don't feel there's anybody, that I have an ability to generally vote for that represents my views. Most mainstream Democrats look like they're still largely in the pocket of the big banks and lawyers and, not really going to do tort reform and, still the insurance companies, and they're still mostly bought and paid for. I'm being cynical, but they don't look like a real, party of the revolution for the people.
No, and Trump's victory demonstrated that there is an opening there, right?
Yes.
And I mean, the funny thing is, in fact, I thought Trump might make that move after becoming president, actually go truly populist. And in fact, I just read something a couple of days ago that supposedly Steve Bannon is advocating a slight tax increase on the rich as part of a revised health care bill in ways that would help middle income people. And I just thought, man, if he says that, if the Republicans say that before the Democrats get around to saying it,
we're looking to Bannon as our source of salvation.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Wow,
that's what I'm saying. So we will leave it on that note of deep disappointment and remind people The shorter. Are you still encouraging people to look at the current version of your book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, or should they wait?
Oh, yeah.
So they shouldn't wait for the new and improved version, which comes out when again?
I don't know. Just however long it takes to turn a manuscript into a book.
Okay.
6 months, I'm not sure. Last time it took about half a year.
And then, and I promised to quit plugging my own book within a couple of months, but it's called Why Buddhism is True, the Science and Philosophy of Meditation and Enlightenment, and will be out any moment now. But, and also you've got dharmaoverground.org, especially for people who are seriously interested in meditation, but not only them. It's interesting reading even for people who aren't, I think, to get a sense for what the culture is like. It's a very unusual site. I don't think there's anything else quite like it.
Awake Network. There's a few kind of sister spin-off sites, so that there's maybe one or two others. So
Awake Network. Okay. We will Google that as well then. Let's do this again and try to save the world, Daniel.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Good talking to you. Bye.
Same here.